Welcome to the X Podcast. So excited to have you with us today. I got my good friend Russ with me.
Hey.
And
I borrowed your hoodie.
That's not mine. What in the world is EPCC? I get ATL. We
East
all know
Pole-
what the ATL is.
What is it?
I don't know.
Okay.
What's it?
This
Atlanta.
is East Pole, Atlanta.
Atlanta.
East Pole Coffee Company.
East Pole?
One of the best. East Pole.
Pole.
One
P-O-L-E.
of the best coffee shops. in the
East
world.
Pole Coffee Company. I've never heard of the
You want one?
EPCC.
You want one? I bought some East Pole Coffee Company coffee.
Yeah,
You want some?
sure.
Okay.
I'll give it to somebody that cares.
Okay.
As you all know, I'm not a coffee drinker. Doesn't mean I won't drink coffee.
You
If
see that
put it-
country.
Won't drink. Won't drink it. Doesn't mean I won't drink. Is that better? Doesn't mean I won't drink coffee.
Yeah.
If you give it to me with lots of cream and some sugar in it,
Okay.
or flavored creamer, that's about it. But black, And you got me at Nashville to do a pour over.
And you loved it.
I did not love it. Do you?
True black coffee is, if it's done really well, is one of the most beautiful experiences in life. And
Okay,
and it'll put hair in your chest.
Okay, I don't need any hair on my chest. I'm good. But anyways, well, we're glad to have you today, and I thought maybe
Am I
we
the special guest?
Huh?
Am I the special guest?
You're the special guest
Okay.
today, so I'm glad to have you. I'll be interviewing you today. I thought, we could talk about something that, a friend of ours brought up to us.
Yeah, I think Pastor Jesse.
No, it wasn't.
It was
Pastor
Jesse.
It was not. Okay, Jesse. Was it Jesse?
It was
Yeah, it was
Jesse.
Jesse. Yeah, he won't like that if we leave his name out. Anyways, just brought up this, sent this article to us, just said maybe this would be a fascinating conversation to have. Really something I think maybe we all notice a little bit, which is it seems like our world is just so angry.
Yeah. Why you so mad, bro?
Yeah. It's just, it feels like everybody is mad all the time.
Yeah.
They're angry. Like, he actually mentioned to us in there, because he was having a conversation with my daughter, and I've had this same conversation with her numerous times. She's a nurse now at Children's in the NICU. And she gets kind of tired after a while of being yelled at all the time.
Yeah.
Like the parents there are always mad, they're angry, and I think partially, I think it kind of points to, I think maybe like I've told her before, and she knows it's not directed specifically at her.
Sure.
But I told her, I said, those parents are going through a very, very tense time where their baby or child is in an intensive care unit, and the uncertainty of that and the effect of that is coming out as anger.
Sure. Yeah.
And so in this article by the Harvard Gazette, and it's an associate professor of psychology.
Really
It was really good. They're kind of interviewing him about anger and why it is that people seem so angry today. And, when you think back to the past couple years, you think about there have been a lot of things that have created a lot of anger in our nation and globally. Everything that COVID has brought. I mean, it's weird because you kind of at times we've all been impacted by COVID. Even as we speak, I've shared kind of with our church that my father-in-law is in the hospital. I don't know if he will be at the time when this comes out, but dealing with COVID and kind of fighting for that. And so we've all been impacted by it. And so, what's hard is when you go through something that is tense, that is tumultuous, that is tragic, you have all of these emotions. And one of the things I think that we always want to look for is who to blame and be angry at. And it's hard sometimes because you want to be angry at a virus, but you're like, well, what good does that do?
Right.
And so I think it's come out in so many different ways, whether it's how we've tried to handle the virus and the masks and the mandates and the quarantines and the lockdowns, and we get mad about that kind of stuff. And then you think about even what happened in the year 2020 with the racial riots and kind of the civil rights movement that happened. And just thinking about it even now, I think it's good to reflect on our history as it's Black History Month in February. And, I think it's kind of maybe that reminder to kind of say, hey, there's the history of how, African Americans were treated in our country, and still, some would say, to this point, are treated in this country in different areas. it's something that one of the things I remember in 2020, even during all of the racial riots and kind of different people speaking out, was it felt a little bit different than previous. Before, a lot of times you would hear a lot of sorrow and a lot of pain come through people's voice and posts. This time I felt like there was a lot of anger.
Yeah.
That kind of rose up in people. And I think we saw that in the riots, and the way that anger over what happened turned in the way it was expressed, turned into a very destructive thing within our country. And so just kind of the broad thing, I don't know. Have you seen, like, does it feel like people are more angry now than they were before? And how do we quantify that or qualify it?
They're angry, they're on edge, and I mean, even the healthiest people I know, I mean, some people are like, oh, I love this. We're processing everything the last 2 years. Some people are, I know some people are like, oh, I'm over it.
Yeah.
But the truth is, like, I was hanging out with one of my heroes the other day.
Oh, it's okay. I mean, I like hanging out with you. You didn't have to do that.
I always say, I have a handful of heroes in my life, and I'm not just saying that. I've told you and Clint are two of those, but I mean, he was talking about, we're talking about different things in church world context of different like leaders that have fallen in just the last 2 years, and he was just like, he goes, it was interesting. He's like, I'm wondering what my son's processing in mid-20s. He goes, and then you in your mid-30s. He goes, and then me, I'm a couple decades ahead. But even me, there's things I'm seeing for the first time that I'm like, how do I navigate that? How do I map that? How do I, and so then you have, I mean, it can't be emphasized enough. This global pandemic, most people, I don't want to say most people, but almost everybody I know lost someone they love through it. And it's impacted probably your career in a way. It's impacted
disrupted life.
It's disrupted life. I mean, one of the things me and him were talking about is, is yesterday, we're like, human beings were not designed to go through what we just went through. They were not designed to be quarantined. Human beings were not designed to be isolated. Human beings were not designed to, I mean, in a previous episode, we talked about how disruption is kind of the normal past order of the world. So human beings are more resilient than I think we know. But when you look at, like you mentioned, everything that happened with the riots last year, I think what you have is a world got shut down. People got more isolated than ever, which has led to more anxiety and depression than ever. It's led to job loss. It's led to financial upheaval. And then in the middle of that, I think you have a lot. So simultaneously, while these external things are coming on, pandemic, loss of life, isolation, anxiety, I think it also triggered things that have been a crock pot for a while boil over. So the racial sorrow, division, unrest, that's been a crock pot for decades, really centuries in some contexts, and it all happened to boil over in the same year. And then you have...
And it was a political year.
And it was
add that to it.
But I was going to say, but politically, there's been a crock pot boiling for a while of division, of unrest, of distrust, of polarization. And guess what happened also during this? That crock pot boiled over.
It was just a crazy year.
And so it's just, yes, how do you map it out? But it is, I mean, a lot of times, I think in the article from Harvard, they're talking about, you see this a lot of times over mass. And it's so funny because, like, just on my trip alone. So I'm at the Raleigh airport about to fly I'm at the Atlanta airport about to fly to Raleigh. And there are these people beside me at a restaurant at the airport that are, I mean, they're as anti-mask as it gets. And, I mean, but it wasn't just like that they didn't believe in it, because everybody's got their opinions. They were like, I mean, and peppered in with some colorful language of GD this and F this. And this conversation between these two people just grew to this crescendo to where when they left, they weren't fighting, they were agreeing with each other. When they left, they said, well, maybe if we're lucky, we'll get an airport jail today. We'll see what happens. And this conversation ended with, keep up your freedoms. Now, on the flip side of that, yesterday I have a buddy that got really frustrated because we went into lunch somewhere. In North Carolina, ironically, is really, really strict. And we were in line, and he pulled down his mask for just a second, and the guy behind the line was like, sir, mask up, mask up. And it kind of frustrated my buddy because the guy beside him didn't even have a mask on, and he didn't say anything. And so I think it finally hit him to the point where he said, oh, hey, your chef back there also has a chin strap. You might want to say. You might, but so you see that. I mean, there's a report that was so heartbreaking a couple weeks ago of a lady punching an elderly man on an airplane because he wasn't wearing his mask properly.
Yeah, I remember saying that.
So on both sides,
yeah.
I mean, and that's not even a commentary on the concerns of both sides where you stand. It's just you have mask is just one symbol.
Oh yeah.
But in our whole world, it seems people they're on edge.
They're on edge.
They're on edge.
Well, and we're seeing the anger spill out, like, and it does feel like people are I'd say they're mad all the time or angry. But one of the things I remember, this was kind of helpful, and actually it was said in the article. I said this to the person that did it. I hadn't even read the article, but I remember when I was talking, I think it was with a counselor, and a counselor was saying, you do realize that some of these feelings or feelings of anger oftentimes are considered secondary emotions.
Yes.
That because I was talking, actually it was the last time I was talking to my counselor, which wasn't that long ago. And I said, I'm angry about something. And that's when my counselor reminded me, and you said, okay, so you just understand what you just said right there is a secondary emotion. What's the underlying emotion?
Yeah.
And that was fascinating, even though anger is considered one of the primary emotions.
Because anger, joy, love, sadness are supposed to be the four primary.
Fear. No, fear, anger, joy, and sadness, not love.
Not love.
Fear,
sorry.
anger, joy, and sadness.
Fear, joy, and sadness.
Yes.
But like you said, anger.
But anger,
usually
but I
expresses
think it
itself as a
actually
secondary.
exhibits itself more as a secondary emotion. Like, and so that was kind of helpful for me. Again, that was a little while ago, and I was talking to my counselor. I was kind of like, okay, if I'm feeling a sense of like I'm angry at these people or this situation, or I'm angry at this, to really ask the question, what am I really feeling?
Right.
What is behind the anger that's coming out?
Right.
A lot of times it's frustration.
Yep.
A lot of times it's disappointment. It could be fear of something that then is expressed in anger. Like we've heard the old adage, right? Hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
And so when that anger comes out of them, it's because they've been hurt.
Are you about to? It's like the prophet Don Henley from the Eagles used to sing.
What did he used to sing?
Anger is just love disappointed.
Anger is just love disappointed. What's that song? What track was that?
What was it? Was it End of the Innocence?
I don't know.
I
I
don't
don't keep
remember.
up on them, but I know some of them. But
It's Heart of the Matter.
Heart of the Matter?
I've been
Sing it.
trying to get down to the heart of the matter.
Yeah. Come on.
And I will get weak.
Okay. That's a beautiful rendition.
Thinking about.
So what was the phrase again?
Anger is just love disappointed.
Yeah. And so I think when you think about that and you think about everything that we've walked through, I don't know that we're going to get back to a better sense of civility. Maybe eventually we will until we kind of address what is really underlying.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a fascinating thing. So have you kind of seen and maybe felt, let's just ask this, and we can talk about, have you felt any kind of like waves of anger that maybe are like, why do I feel this way over the past year or two? And I think a lot of times it comes out and it might be pointed at a person or a situation that you have in your life, but really it's because of it, almost like you said, the crock pot effect.
Right.
Things have actually been like, maybe you just had a lot of bad things that just happened to you in your life and you just get angry and it's just spilled out. Can you think of anything that's in your life or are you just pretty much not angry ever?
I don't get angry a lot. I think fear expresses itself in anger. And I think hopelessness expresses itself in sadness and despair. And I feel like in my moments of emotional unhealth, I tend to lean more towards the unhealthy emotions of self-pity more than I do anger. Like I can get angry.
Yeah.
And trust me, I've had moments of anger for sure. It's usually directed at myself, or if I feel really hurt by someone, I'll be frustrated. I'll feel anger, but of all my, I'm as imperfect as it gets. But I don't. That's not usually the manifestation of my unhealth.
Does it come out as expressed anger?
Doesn't come out usually as expressed anger. I think. To me, this isn't what you asked, but first of all, what about you?
I don't. I'm kind of a little bit like you in the fact that I don't like road rage doesn't happen, and I don't blow up at people out loud.
Yeah.
I do in my head.
Yeah.
And so, again, I mean, just in all honesty and transparency, that's what I was meeting with my counselor about, was like, I'm having all these emotions. I remember,
that's good. I do in my head.
I do in my head, but and that's also unhealthy.
Right.
Because you also create narratives and you start building, you know, when I see them, I'm going to say this, and then I'll talk, okay, no, I'm not going to do that. And so I in processing it a little bit, for me, I think it comes back to a sense of. So one of the things that has been, I'll just be real. I'll be real transparent, right? So I don't know if I should be. Okay, so one of the things, like I was talking to the counselor about, was that I found myself, and I think some of this is just over time, like it just kind of builds up. But there had been so much. I don't know the best way to describe it. You know what we've kind of experienced. So it's what we've experienced globally, but then in the church world, we've also experienced a massive shuffling. There's, you know, all kinds of people that just, they left without a word. They left with barely a word. They left with an angry word or a bad word. They, you know, and this was not over anything. Some of the times it wasn't over anything you did or said. It's what they thought you might believe, or what they thought you might be for, and who they thought you were against, which wasn't right or true. And so collectively, and then there were just these pockets of everything bubbling up during the pandemic, of when in the church world, it's like, well, if you're not meeting, you're living in fear, and you know, and so I'm going to leave, or you know, you didn't do enough during the racial unrest, and you didn't say enough, and you didn't post enough, and do it. You said this, and you came out and said that, and you dressed us, and we had people leave for all kinds of reasons, and it was like we either didn't say enough or we said too much, so we couldn't win. No matter what you could do, we could not win. Leadership, and that's not just us. I think it's nationally, no matter where it was. And so I think a little bit of that had just kind of built up over the last like kind of 2 years. So I mean, you remember, I was a couple months ago. I was just in one of those funky moods, and it was like it doesn't
but you
matter.
Rarely get it.
Yeah, but it was just like it doesn't matter, and that's when I think
it was my fault.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. No, I got one of those moods that it was just kind of like, and it was about, you know, the church, and it was almost, so it came out as cynicism.
Yeah.
It came out as pessimism. It came out, like, that's the way it came out in this kind of setting. But you could tell, even when we were talking underneath, and I could tell that I've got some kind of low-lying anger that I think has just been 2 years of dealing with situations of people walking away, leaving, mad. You can't make anybody happy. Everybody, you say, hey, no masks. Now people are mad.
Right.
You said wear masks. People are mad. It didn't matter. You know, like, I mean, conversations that we have on here, it's like we're not even trying to say you should get vaccinated, you shouldn't get vaccinated. People are taking it one way or the other. They're mad. It's like, it just felt like no matter what we said. So then I kind of got to a point where it's like, I'm just not going to say anything. I'm just done. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about anything. And I'm still probably trying to come back from that, but that's just kind of where I've been. I'm like, I'm just not going to say anything. People, no matter what I say, they're going to get mad. And so I think that just for me, I think it never really came out. Like, I don't think it would come out to a lot of people, either publicly or I did anybody personally. But it is something that I've expressed a little bit in very small circles. And so that was where I was like, okay, I reached out and I was like, hey, to my counselor, you want to have a video session? And in that's what I said. I said, I don't know why, I'm angry. And I don't know how to, you know. And so I think all that to say, I'm not the type that will really express that or lash out. But I think if I don't recognize that and where it's coming from, and if I don't process it, if I don't pray about it, if I don't release it, if I don't go, okay, what's really behind that, then I do think this is what happens with people. I think it builds up over time. And I do think it will come out. It'll come out. I see one of the things I didn't want to do is I don't ever, like what I do in pastoring and preaching, I don't want to come out and preach angry. I don't want it to come across that way.
You don't want to lead from
I
frustration.
don't want to lead from it. But and so that was my counselor asking me. It was like, okay, well, that's a secondary emotional that you're describing to me right now. What's the underlying thing? And so And so it's kind of been a journey. I don't know it, and I can't identify. I'll let you talk because I don't want to say more.
No,
I say too much.
What are you really
sometimes.
feeling now?
Huh?
What are you really feeling? Say
What
more.
do you mean?
Say
Why?
more.
No, you were going to say something.
more.
Say something.
Okay, we're gonna come back to this though.
Oh no.
So, but you just made me, because I was thinking more about what you said, because listening to you process. Maybe I say it this way. I tend, if I'm dealing with anger, because I've had more anger than I'm probably thinking about right now. But I think if I'm angry / disappointed or frustrated, because I have conversations in my head, and you know me, I don't want it to sound like, oh, I'm so chill, I just never get.
Right.
I get passionate.
Yeah.
I get very intense.
Yeah.
I get very frustrated at times because I feel like I heard someone say like passion and frustration shake hands. So if you're never frustrated, you may not just you may actually not be passionate enough.
I agree.
So I definitely get frustrated. I just don't know that it turns into. Let me say it this way: it never really turns into rage.
Yeah.
What it probably turns into, and I'm angry,
But I think rage is like the anger that's exploding.
It's exploding.
But I think that doesn't mean you don't still can be angry.
You know what I think I tend to do? I either go into despondency or drivenness.
Okay.
I think I get if I'm not careful, I can isolate and become despondent to an extent.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever let myself stay there too long. Or I can get really driven, which can be both healthy or unhealthy.
Okay.
Like if something happened, I mean, an example would be the moment COVID hit. I got really driven.
Yeah.
Or if there's a relational fracture, I can be really driven. Oh, I'm going to take control of my life. I'm going to,
Yeah.
I think that's what I do. But to take a step back, to put the heat off me and you for a moment, we can return to psychoanalyze ourselves. If I were going to try to psychoanalyze our society, I think the two, first off, on a political scale, we've not had leaders, and this is not a shot towards either side, on all sides, we've not had leaders model civility or push the country towards dignified conversation, nuance. We've had a lot of fear-mongering, a lot of malicious rhetoric, and that has exacerbated everything that's been going on.
Yeah.
But if you're going to dig to roots, I think that the deepest roots of the last 2 years that we're seeing manifest in the fruit of anger is hopelessness and fear. Not to quote my own book. I don't know that I've ever quoted it before. But one of the things I discuss in the book is the correlation between hopelessness and violence, between hopelessness and anger. That if you look at the most violent neighborhoods, they're the most hopeless.
Yeah.
That where there's shallow waters of hope, there's going to be deep waves of frustration. And you'll never meet someone that's full of hope but also full of anger.
Yeah.
You'll never meet somebody that's full of hope but also full of fear. If hope is the antidote that drives all that away. But the moment you lose hope, it's kind of like, in a weird way, not to bring it back to the race stuff, it's kind of like what Martin Luther King Jr. said. He said, riots are the language of the unheard.
Yeah.
The moment someone feels like it's hopeless and there's a never-ending cycle and I don't really have much hope for the future and I don't have a lot to be excited about, the only thing that can come out, whether sideways, oozing out sideways, passive-aggressive, or in direct aggression, is anger and frustration and malice. It's why people take out their frustration on their spouse or their families. They come home, they feel hopeless and frustrated, and it's going to ooze out. So I think what we're seeing now, I mean, we know that through this pandemic, through the isolation, through the last 2 years, you talked about it in your message, the statistics of anxiety,
and depression,
the statistics of depression, the statistics of suicide.
Yeah.
So there's
Domestic
a direct
abuse,
correlation between
domestic abuse have risen.
So, and those are the expressions of anger.
Yeah.
That are directly related, in my mind, to the expressions and the reality of hopelessness. But on the other hand, sorry, you're going to say something?
No, go ahead.
But on the other hand, I think what you also have is this pandemic of fear has created an epidemic of anger.
Yeah.
This pandemic of fear has created an epidemic of anger. And there's a term I heard someone use, I don't know, 5 or 6 months ago that like when you mentioned this topic, in my mind, we are living, especially in America, I feel like, but all around the world, one of the biggest reasons we're seeing anger is we are in a state of hypervigilance.
Yeah.
Hypervigilance, I actually looked up a couple definitions. One of them medically, it says this, it's when the nervous system is inaccurately filtering sensory information and the individual is in an enhanced state of sensory sensitivity. This other one I really like, because usually hypervigilance used to just be a term people would use for PTSD, military. I had a buddy a roommate when I lived in Lexington, Kentucky, that did several tours in Afghanistan, and the first year back, I remember thinking, what is wrong with him? But he was in a state of hypervigilance.
Yeah.
An IED had blown him up.
Oof.
He had scars in his legs, and every time he'd be driving down the road, and there'd be the slightest light or bump on the road. Why? Because look at this definition. Yeah. Hypervigilance is the elevated state of constantly assessing potential threats around you. And it is often the result of trauma.
Yeah.
So in my mind, one of the main reasons we're seeing anger is because as a society and as individuals, I don't think it's hyperbolic to say we have been traumatized over the last 2 years.
No, I agree.
And as a result, we're hypervigilant. In every way, we're hypervigilant. Yeah. So the anti-maskers are hypervigilant because the fear is, wait, what's happening to the nation I love? What's happening to my rights?
Right.
We're going to lose this.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you have a lady punching an 80-year-old man because her hypervigilance says, you're going to kill me. You're going to endanger the people I love. You're going to keep this epidemic going for longer and longer. You have this going on in school systems politically. Have you heard of the mama bear thing now? It's a big new movement of moms.
Okay.
A lot of it's part of a Christian movement.
With the schools and stuff?
It's basically saying, look, the liberal world and the modern school system is trying to do this with our kids, and we're going to band together and not on my watch. And again, this isn't – I'm not making an observation or a commentary on validity or lack of validity on any of these sides. Yeah. They all probably have a ring of validity of, okay, there's a concern here, there's a concern there. There is in my mind,
anger doesn't come from concern.
The anger
comes from it's worse than that.
It's this hypervigilance.
It's a fear
that is exacerbated by politicians, exacerbated by the echo chambers we put ourselves in, exacerbated by the algorithms that we lock ourselves into that keep reinforcing all of these fears to the point where your political party is the enemy that endangers my existence.
Yeah.
And so I'm hyper vigilant. I mean, why? I mean, not to get back into it. Why was the Capitol stormed?
Yeah.
We're in a hyper vigilant state that people were trying to ruin our nation, steal an election, whatever it is. Again, I'm not making a commentary politically, so don't write emails.
Because we're tired of people getting mad and angry, and we just don't want to. We're just trying to have a conversation.
I'm saying on both sides, I think there's valid concerns for saying, hey, we've got to be careful in this epidemic, and we've got to use the best science available. And on the other hand, I think there's valid concerns of government overreach. And we should care about our rights. And we should care about mandates if they're unconstitutional. There can be valid concerns on both without living in a hyper state of vigilance. Because what happens when there's vigilance is violence. Yeah. Violence comes from hypervigilance.
Yeah. And they're all valid points. And I do think that fear is I feel like right now, at least within our nation, fear is the number one emotion that is connected to anger, more than anything else. Yes. And you know what you mentioned, Martin Luther King Jr. And one of the things that I think that I just respect Martin Luther King Jr. so much. I wrote a little bit about him in my book, and just because one of the things that I found really fascinating, and I really believe that his faith was a driver in all of these things too, that he really stood for, is here was a guy that had every reason, like so many, to like you said, wanting to kind of erupt in like, hey, this has happened. I mean, he dealt with so many different things. Thrown in prison, he was attacked, he was all these things. Eventually, he was murdered, but his response was nonviolence. And to me, there was some that I think is what moved the movement.
Right. Yeah.
It wasn't anger in the response, and that is hard. That is
because
really
you know what motivated
hard.
him? Hope.
Yeah, but it is. I have a dream, right? That one day, you know, and so those are kind of some of the things that when you look at some of the movements that have really been started, they don't come from anger. No. Not the ones that really bring meaningful change. No. And
nothing beautiful is created from anger.
No, it's destructive. That comes from anger. And I think one of the things that is reason why I think it's probably good to have this conversation is because what I don't think is happening in our culture today. Again, we've talked about a variety of different things and intentionally talking around them because we don't care. So I don't have an opinion on Mama Bear and not Mama Bear and that kind of stuff. Like to me, it's more about, I think all of us collectively need to do our own personal reflection, okay, you go back or ask somebody or go back and look at your posts and all this stuff. If anger is spilling out, if you're like, I'm angry at the government or I'm angry at these people because they don't wear masks, I'm angry at these people. I think we all need to do a little bit of self-reflection and go, why am I angry?
Yep.
Because that is not, in fact, in that article, the psychologist kind of made reference to a situation, and I've read about some of these, of like, you talk about mama bears, about parents going to school board meetings over the masks and over the remote learning and over all these different things that I've read and watched about them getting violent. I mean, and he talks about even, some people saying that they're going to follow teachers to their homes. They're going to follow, like, all this stuff. And I think, look, I think we can have concern. I mean, I have concerns about a lot of things I see in our culture and where our world's going. But I think when we cross the line to that type of expression that's so unhealthy, I think we need to stop, and we need to all ask ourselves, and this might be a little challenging, and I think it should be, to kind of say, why am I angry right now? Because he said, what happens is that someone gets into the school board and makes a threat and thinks that I'm going to exert my force, and if you don't take my threat seriously, then something bad could happen. What is a threat? It's really to get somebody to change what they're doing or else. And what he said is, and this is almost always the case with a threat, especially in a situation like that, what we don't realize is that the opposite happens. You actually lose credibility. They don't listen to you. We don't. I don't. You're going to submit a threat and this and that rather than having a conversation. You lose footing in that conversation. Versus if you were to address and say, honestly, I don't know that I can keep doing this anymore. I don't know. That's what he kind of used. Like, is if a parent is saying this, I need help. I can't manage my kids being home and not being able to work, and us potentially losing our jobs because of it, losing our house because of this. And so if it was expressed from a sense of transparency, these are my fears, these are my worries, instead of coming out as anger, you actually might get somewhere. People might actually say,
it takes vulnerability.
Oh, yeah.
And it takes you actually being willing to value the other person enough to communicate in a more winsome way. Because I love the examples. It's so great, practical handles. I mean, he even said, for instance, even like on the mask thing. What if like, regardless of what side you're on, what if, let's say you're against masks. What if it wasn't, stop trying to control me? What if it turned into, hey, like, I got to be uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable wearing one because I'm concerned about where some of the rights that I feel like I've held on to, and so I could be wrong. I do care about people's health, but I'm just concerned, and so. But we're not vulnerable enough, transparent enough to say that's my fear. And to have a conversation. I think it's so good. And on that too, I think, like, kind of related. I think one of the reasons we get angry and fearful is, and maybe this boils down to more on a personal level, is we have a scarcity mindset. Because when you have a scarcity mindset, you think that there's this, get spiritual for a minute. There's this verse in James that says you devour each other because you envy for each other, but you have not because you ask not. I challenged a group of leaders yesterday. I was like, some people get angry and insecure about other people's successes, and they're not able to celebrate it. Because we have this zero-sum game mentality but the people that create the future that are full of hope, no matter what's going on around them, they don't feel like they have to steal. They don't feel like they have to tear each other down. They don't feel like they have to attack because there's not a scarcity mindset. There's not this fear-based mindset that says I've got to hoard or I've got to attack. I have all that I need. I'm going to get spiritual for a minute. I have all that I need in God. I know who I am. I mean, even with friendships, it sounds weird, but you can even think from a relational level. If friends are starting to turn their back, of course, that's going to make you frustrated if you're losing friends. But guess what? If God's the provider of your relationship, and if he can provide every single thing you need, then he can give you every relationship you need. And I know I got spiritual for a moment, but I think like a practical thing, if you're struggling with this, because we're all going to struggle with this, is to realize that I've got to chip away at any kind of scarcity mindset I have. No matter what's happening in the world around me, I've got enough internally And if I in my faith, I have enough in God to where I'm never going to be lacking, and I never have to live in fear.
Yeah.
And I've got to just make a choice to not to step back from fear. If there's concerns, I can be concerned, but I'm not going to be a part of the fear mongering. I'm not going to listen to or watch fear mongering. I'm not going to let that perpetually get in my spirit. I'm going to have concerns, but I'm going to attack it with faith and love. And where there's hopelessness, I've got to surround myself with hope. I've got to get a fresh vision for the future, and I've got to let my soul become filled with hope again, because if I don't, frustration is going to come out of the flower bed of my life, and it's going to spread roots on everybody around me.
Through anger. And I think one of the things that might be helpful, you've mentioned, I can be concerned. And I think this is where maybe people don't understand, and maybe we can define the line just for a second. Okay, you can be concerned about what's happening at your kid's school, or you can be concerned about what's going on in regards to the virus and masks and mandates and all these other good stuff. Where, to me, it crosses from concern to anger is concern is when you're expressing what your fear is, you're expressing what your worry is, you're expressing, I'm worried that we're losing some rights that we've had. I'm worried that again, going back multiple presidencies, the amount of executive orders is giving some, carte blanche power to whatever party is in office, or in Senate to do this. I'm worried about, what's happening with the abortion. I'm worried what's happening with the voter. Like, there's so many different things that you could say. I've got concern, worries. To me, maybe where it crosses to anger is where where you start to turn that worry and concern of what's happening from the conversation to pointing it at somebody. And it's addressing that person. They are doing this. They're, the enemy. They're this. And I understand that there are certain times that there's people in groups that are actually, pushing causes that maybe are bothersome to you. And but I think this is where we have to learn to draw the line. That I'm not trying to attack this person.
Right.
Or I'm not, I'm just worried about what's going on. I think the reason why we don't like to do this is because we just feel like that's weak. We feel like if I'm going to make a statement, I've got to come out and I've got to be, I got to stand strong and harsh.
Attack people.
And I think there's also a difference between, we've talked about this before on this podcast, there's a difference between attacking an ideology or attacking a concept or an idea and attacking a person. And I think when anger overflows, it comes out usually because why? Because if I am fearful or if I have, any of these pain, I'm looking for someone to blame. And so the anger is going to come out and it's going to be pointed at President Biden, at former President Trump, at Congress, at my governor, at the school board, at, you know what I mean? At the employer. And it just comes out and we get angry and we do that. And I think it doesn't help. I mean, I understand that, again, I want to temper that with there's a reason why there are demonstrations. There's a reason why Martin Luther King Jr. was trying to lead, and he was trying to lead a nonviolent reform in our country. There's a reason why it spills over, like you said, that riots are the language of the unheard, like that it does. But to actual bring real change, it does take conversation, and it does. And so we got to be able to have those kind of conversations in our lives. But I think at the end of the day, here's my take. Is I don't want anger to be the fruit of my life.
No.
I mean, I just talked about it in our church a couple weeks ago about being different. And I talked about, and even Paul said that's your old nature, that anger and rage is your old nature. So let me just say this for every Christian, every Christ follower that's watching or listening to this right now. The common response in our culture today that is anger, it's not okay. For you as a Jesus follower to respond in kind. Just let that sit for a moment. You can be mad at me. I don't care. That's fine. I'm just telling you, if you're not a Christ follower, this does not apply to you. But if you are someone, Scripture tells us that is the old nature. Paul says you're supposed to take off the old nature. I took that jacket off and I threw it on the ground. And you're supposed to walk in something different. Love and joy and peace and patience and mercy and for others, and which really become the fruit of God inside of you. And so I just kind of want this, even if it wasn't the intention, but this conversation, if anything, I hope will be a mirror for every person that's a Jesus follower to look in the mirror and go, am I being angry? Am I, every conversation that I'm having with somebody, is anger coming out of me?
Yeah.
Is that my response right now? And if so, why? Because it could be that you're hurt.
Yeah.
It could be that you're dealing with pain. It could be you're struggling with something like that. It could be frustration. It could be, and it's fun. Then I think you got to process that. Why am I angry? Why am I so mad? Because it doesn't really do you any good to live that way.
No.
You don't want to live with anger in your life. You will become a bitter soul.
Yeah.
And that's just not the kind of life I feel like that we're
Mark Twain said
live.
that anger is an acid that does more on the vessel in which it's stored than on the one in which it's poured.
It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, right?
Acid that just it really and you feel it when
You have that Mark Twain quote memorized and you just hold on to it. Who remembers that? You and quotes are so odd. It's a great way, though. I mean, that's great. It is. It's like acid. I just like, where do you pull these things from? Okay, sorry. It's like acid on your soul.
It really is. I mean, and you know what it's like? Because I have days where I'll hold in anger for a day or two, and it's just at the end of it, I'm just like, this is not. I mean, we have scientific evidence of what it does to our bodies to hold anger in for a while. It just rots your soul.
Yeah.
And it's not worth it. And on top of that, as a witness, like you said, if you claim to follow Jesus, there was something Ben Stewart said at Passion Conference that must have been in the book. You quoted it in the message this Sunday. Say it.
Oh, idolatry is...
No, about peace.
Oh, yeah. What did he say? He says, the world doesn't, the world's not going to take notice or something along the lines of those of us that we preach.
He said it doesn't matter if you preach a gospel of peace,
Prince of Peace.
Live a life full of stress.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do you, maybe another practical, landing thought too is, how do we attack the norm in our society? How do we counterattack it?
Anger. Lots of anger. Angry posts.
Can I tell you what I was convicted by? My buddy I was hanging out with in Raleigh. I feel like I've not done such a great job of this over the last few years. Part of it's like, I mean, every region's different, but and I feel like I always try to be kind wherever I go.
Yeah.
But I noticed every coffee shop, every like Uber or wherever we would go, every single person, he would go out of his way, hey, how are you doing today? Like,
engage the person.
And not just engage the person, but genuinely be like, hey, so you having a good day? And be like, and that person, you could just see that person always soften.
Yeah.
And he was like, how are you doing today? You doing okay? And then he would find ways to joke around and just be normal with them. And every single person, he would actually not just be kind, not just actually look them in the eye. That's the starting place.
Yeah.
He would actually engage them, ask how their day's been, ask how they're doing. And I was just like,
care about them. That's cool.
Man, like I need to.
It's challenging, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think I've moved so busy and so frantic, and it's like, I'm polite.
Yep.
But I don't see the people.
Here's
all
my
the time.
credit card.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me keep texting while I was texting on my phone. Thank you, human vending machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
no wonder people get angry.
Yeah.
Because the way they're treated, and that's like just full circle. That's like my daughter. I think a lot of people right now, it's really hard if you're in the service industry, the medical care industry, any of those type, even first responder industry. You just feel like it's a thankless job, and partially because you have been on the recipient of so many people's anger.
Right.
And again, anger begets anger, unfortunately, and that's how violence escalates.
Yep.
That's how all these things. And so, I think maybe our challenge from this episode really is to look in the mirror and kind of, if you feel sometimes what starts off as frustration but boils over to anger, really ask, why am I frustrated? And I would even say frustration, and I don't know this for sure, but I would say frustration obviously is a secondary emotion as well. But I think a lot of times it's fear, hopelessness, things like that, or loss, and that turn into frustration that boils over to anger. And
in the last 3 years, I was in Atlanta, and I have some friends now that don't. I love Atlanta; it's one of my favorite cities in the world. But crime has like tripled, It's insane.
Yeah,
and it's because people are lacking hope.
Yeah,
they're hypervigilant. I mean, why do you think? I mean, going back to the hypervigilance thing. Why? And there's all kind of arguments about this. Why do you think gun sales have skyrocketed? People can't buy up guns.
But I don't think it's because it's anger. I think it's because fear.
That's what I'm saying.
I think it's fear.
That's the hypervigilance. Out of fear comes this hypervigilance.
And that's can get you into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
That can get you into trouble. And so, so I think this is a good conversation to have. I think it is something that we should. I mean, and if you maybe not kind of thought about this, then here's what you do as you're listening to this or watching this. Pay attention the next day or two.
Yeah.
Pay attention the next day or two. Your interactions with people, what you see on social media. You know, and you might start to see, wow, you know, people are angry, and then the real question is, am I angry?
Yeah.
And why am I angry? And process through that, and because that's how we get healthy.
Right.
When we pinpoint the areas of, okay, why am I feeling this way or this, and then how do I deal with it? And you gotta face it and deal with it. Otherwise, you're just gonna deal with bitterness and anger, and that's no fun. I think we want a world that's fun. I just want to get back to where there's just, you know, where you just don't have to like, you know, be hyper vigilant because you don't know what you're going to come across. You know, I just want to have fun. Yeah. Can we just have fun and enjoy life? So
I love it.
Anyways, well, thank you for joining us for this episode, and we hope that it was engaging for you. And we'd love to like just feedback if you recognize that in you, that maybe anger, you know, maybe leave a comment on the post, or you know, you can send us an email anytime, podcast@thex.church. If you have anything you'd love for us to wrestle with, we've got plenty of things that we can talk about. We've got a list, and we got some people.
I want to talk about America and Australia.
Okay, we're not doing that now.
Okay.
He really wants to talk about America and Australia. I don't know. We'll see. We got a couple guests that we're going to bring on.
Okay.
So, but anyways, thank you for joining us, and it always means a lot to us that whenever you would share it and subscribe so you can catch up on the latest episodes that drop every Friday. And so thank you for joining us today. We'll catch you next week. See ya.